Week 6, Lecture 2, and we're going to finish up particles tonight. I'm just going to purge this. That was 40 gigs eaten up on my computer for that one animation. I've got my solid here, and we're going to be using Particle World for the evening. Okay, and quick recap. I've got this flower, and I will use it as a custom particle. So when you're doing a custom particle, you want it between 200 by 200 or 400 by 400. The smaller, the faster it'll be. So I'm going to make this 200. Throw this in there. Scale it down so the entire image fits in. And that's good. Now, reminder that you can also animate still images or use video clips. So I'm going to put my anchor point at the bottom, like such. And to give this a little bit of life, I'm going to scale it up over the course of a second. Instead of doing a non-uniform, let's do a uniform and see how that looks. All right, so there's my motion. I'm going to easy ease this, like such. Go into my speed graph. Good evening, Kelly. Click here to magnify it. Go back to my selection tool. And I'm going to have it slow in to the second point. And I'll speed out of the beginning a little bit. So it's going a little bit faster, then very slow into the second one. Click here to get out of my speed graph. Let's check out my motion now. There you go. So it's popping up. Now I want to have a little bit of afterlife to it. So I'm going to have it bend like it's swaying in the breeze. Throw bender on there. And remember, whenever you see these crosshairs, you click once, then you click again. So I'm setting that as the top. Same thing. Setting that as the bottom. And I'm going to put an expression in here by holding down Alt or Option, clicking on there. We'll do a little bit of a wiggle. Double click to finish the expression. Let's say twice a second, amount of 20. Remember, if you see the text cursor, you're still in the effect field. When you see the arrow, that means you can click out, because every expression must be entered precisely and with all the proper line breaks. Okay, 20 is a bit much, so I'm going to do 10. See how that looks. That's a bit better. I can live with that. So I'm happy. There's my custom particle. And I'm going to name it, just so there's no confusion. These double arrows here will take you back and forth between project and effects. I'll call this flower PC. And this one I'll just call main animation. All right. So I'm going to throw my flower in here, hide it, go to my particle layer. All right, so I'm also noticing I'm probably at 32 bits from last week. I'm holding down Alt or Option and clicking to get back to 8-bit. There we go. So let's go over what I want. I want the flowers to look like they're growing up from the ground, filling up a field. So first, find a particle physics engine that works. I think fire might be my best bet. So I'm going to say the ground's down here. Let's lower the velocity. Let's change the gravity. So that's pretty interesting. I'm going to set my extra to 0. No, I'm going to keep it where it was. I'm doing pretty good here. Don't forget, resistance will also help tighten it up as well. So now let's go to our producer and widen this. Make it go a little bit deeper out towards the field. Okay, fine with that. So we want these to last a long time. I need my selection arrow. So I'll make this, let's say 9 seconds, longer than the length of this. Birth rate, 4, I guess. That's a bit too much. Let's do 2. All right. So I basically have my look going on. Let's take a look at this physics a little bit more. Let's lower that extra. Let's look at our particle. I'm going to want to use the color of the flower. So just a reminder, under the color, I'm going to set both to white. So it uses the color of the photo. Maximum opacity 100, because flowers aren't really see-through. Under opacity map, that means fade off, fade on. Don't want that. So I'm just filling it in with a pen. And now I can set up my particles. I'm going to use a texture faded disk so that there's no hard edges. And then the texture is the custom particle, which is my flower. I'm going to do effects and mask. Now you can see the flowers starting to grow. They're going to be larger as they die. So let's see how big I want them. That's pretty interesting. Let's make the birth size a little bigger too. All right. And now we've got some stuff happening, so there's a bit too much motion. Let's dial down the resistance. Let's clamp that up a bit. So they start growing. Good. You got that little bit of swaying. They're not moving around as much. Let's get rid of the extra completely. That's helping it out a lot more. And let's drop down the birth rate. So there's half the number of particles in there. All right, cool. Now I'm just going to spread them out a little bit more. There we go. Spraying out in Z helped a lot. I'm going to change that Y to 0. There we go. I'm a bit happier with that. And I could always put an image behind it if I wanted to, you know, like a grassy field to fill that in, but the weird thing is there's some rotation happening in here, which I don't want, and there shouldn't be. I'm just going to take a quick look. No, I don't want random seed there. Oh, here we go. Rotation. Let's do 0, and let's do 0 there. Now they're all sticking straight up. That is much better. That's a little bit of problem solving with your particle. I'm much happier with that. So I was just trying to figure out where that rotation was. There's also this align to direction. I don't really mess around with that, but much better, much better. Okay. So are there any questions from that quick recap on the first part of particles? Anything can be a particle. It's going to be born, then it's going to do something, then it's going to die. The longer you have the life, the longer it stays on the screen. So for more complex animation, you want a longer life. All right, so there's no questions on the old stuff. All right. I'm going to start with the new stuff. So I'm going to purge my memory and disk cache, 20 gigs for that one particle animation. All right. I'm going to hit reset here to reset my particle system. And I'm going to put a black solid behind here so that everyone can see better and you won't be straining your eyes. So there's my particles, okay? Everyone good with that so far? All right. Good evening, Sarah. Oh, okay, so we went over a lot of the settings. Here's my particles. All right. Now we're going to dive into a little bit more because that's what this class is all about. starting on something, then pushing it. I'm going to animate the position of this. So I'm going to click here, here, and here. Move forward. There. There. And there. Let's see if that fixes anything. Okay. So now the particles are moving around, but you also see we're getting a hard edge here. So I'm going to reset and not do that. Let me hit U to get rid of the keyframes. Reset. Okay. Oh, my layer's not centered too. So if I hit P, .960 by 540 will center it out. Okay, so let's try that again, but using numbers. See, now it's working using numbers. And then I'll explain something in a second. Okay, now, for those of you following along, if you're not seeing the motion path, under Grid and Guides, there's Motion Path. The default is off, and this is on. I'm doing this to show you something. These are hard lines. There's no curve to them. By default, the particle world will not create curves for your motion paths. The green line is the motion path. Okay. Now, as motion designers, this is not very helpful to us. It's actually a hindrance. Okay? Because this is the 3D particle system, and we want it to have nice curves and fall off on Z-space rather than move about on this one axis. So I'm going to get rid of all those keyframes, and we're back to normal. This is the solution for it. In Canvas, I have an expressions sheet that I did for everybody. It's, let's see. There it is. In reference, there's an expressions. So this is the expression, and I'm going to explain it to you. Normally, when people have expressions, there's notes to guide you. So here's my reminder. Hold down Alt or Option when you're clicking. This is what's important. In quotes, name of the null. We're going to place a null in our scene. Whatever the name of that null is, you've got to change in each part of this expression where it says name of null with what the actual null is named. And you do not copy the axes up here. It's just this part. So this will go into the X stopwatch. This will go into Y. And this will go into Z. So I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to grab just this part, hit copy, and add my null. Layer, new, null object. Reminder, nulls are invisible. They're just used to help with parenting and complex animations. I'm in my modes. I'm clicking toggle switches and modes. Now I'm back in my switches. Free to enable this. Twirl it down. I'm going to hit P for position. Now I've got my X, Y, and Z. So I took this first part for X, copied it. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and click on the position stopwatch for the particle system, paste it in, and the name of my null is null space 1. So I renamed it there. I'm going to click out. Now that part works. For the Y, I'm going to copy this part of the expression. Twirl that down to give myself some more space. I hold down Alt or Option, click on the Y for the particle system, paste it in, and my null is called null space 1. Click out the expression, close the arrow up. And lastly, for Z, get the Z part of the expression, hold down Alt or Option, click there, paste it, change the name of the null, to what it is in my scene. Click out. Now we're done. Now we test it. If I move this, the particle system moves with it. So now we're going to see if we can get a nice curve. Already, we've got a curve. The expression worked. So you have to do that expression to get your particle system to work off a curve. And a reminder, you can click on the path points to change the Bezier curves. I'm just moving one axis at a time. See if I can right click and change this. No. Let's try convert vector tool. There we go. I clicked and dragged, and I'm going to fix this one over here. Now I've got my curve handles. That was right here under my pen tool, the convert vector. So now I've got a nice curve happening with my animation. And I can even have it go further or closer to the camera, should I choose. I'm going to use my previous, and let's go towards the camera there. Like such. That's how you get your particles to follow a curve. I'm going to easy ease this. This is also useful if you're getting them to follow something like a special effect. Any questions on that expression and getting a curved motion path with particles?
Where do you put the file again? I'm having trouble finding it.
It is. So the graphics folder in files, Art228 virtual, and then the reference files folder.
Oh, okay. I got it. Thank you.
No problem at all. So that's where that expression is, as well as some other ones. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is used a lot to get your particles moving. And you've all seen this in the Apple commercials, that long exposure light leak effect. So I'm going to hide my grid. Let me twirl that down. Let me get rid of that. Let's do particles. Instead of line, let's try, let's try a line, I guess. Yeah, we'll do a line. Maximum opacity, 100%. I'm not going to have it fade off or on. Okay, good. That's set for that. So we've got the starting of that. Okay, good. I'm going to make sure my particles stay the same size from birth to death. Okay, yeah, that's because it's a line. So now, in my physics, I'm going to get rid of the velocity because I want my particles to stay close together. I'm going to get rid of the gravity. Now we're starting to get somewhere. I'm going to get rid of the extra. And I'm going to get rid of this one rotation in the extra angle. And before, under particle, I believe was where the other stuff was hanging out. Yeah, rotation's not happening there now. So that's good. Let's crank up our particle numbers, and we'll have them live longer. Now we're starting to get somewhere. We'll do even more. See, now we're getting a solid drawing. Let's have them live a little longer. Shorter. If we want that to go away a little sooner, let's have it be half a second. See, now, with the shorter life, we're getting more of that effect happening. And also with that shorter life, we've got less particles and a faster render. So now it's just a matter of dialing in your look. Crank up the particle counts. They're nice and close together. Let's look at the physics again. Let's try direction axis for the physics engine. That should help us out a little bit. If you want them to fall a little bit as they're drawing, you can give it some gravity. That's up to you as the designer. That's just a little bit more extra complexity. And let's try screen. See, now we're getting some light to it. So you could change the maximum opacity to fiddle around with that light that we're getting, so it's not so overexposed. So that's one thing. Let's try shaded sphere. And let's make it smaller. 0.1. Let's get it 0.05. Let's have it shrink over time. Just to see what that does. See, now we're getting a little bit of this more like fairy dust type look. You usually don't want to have things like the depth shading on for this, for these light effects. So let's try going up to 32 bits. And I'm going to have it be the same size so that we don't have that effect happen, just for the fun of it. And lastly, since I got everything else working, let's see what random seed's going to do. Just give it a little bit of a flair to it. All right, so that's working, and I can just throw a glow on it if I want. Let's increase the radius. See, now we're getting a bit more smoothness. Let's adjust our threshold. Fill in some of that. Oh, and lastly, while we're kicking this up a notch, let's add some motion blur to it. Now I've got my long exposure light leak look with a little bit of gravitational pull. So this would work with anything, any particle type if you wanted. Like we could throw clouds in there if you wanted it to look like a Death Eater apparating somewhere. But it's really, to get these types of effects, you want in your physics no velocity. And we could even tighten up the resistance if we want. But the velocity, having no velocity keeps the particles closer together. And I did a direction axis for this. If I tighten up the resistance, that's going to help it out a bit too. Like such. Any questions on that expression? Because it's a very useful one to start getting some, very useful particle simulations. No? Okay. You know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. Let's see. I think it's week 9. I'm going to show you another use for this. Let's say so. That's week 9. Okay, no. Let's try this folder. All right, cool. I'm going to download this colorful paint swatch and this black and white one. I'll close out there. And I'm going to import both of them. First, I'll try the color one. Color paint, 200 by 200. Yep. Throw that in there. Scale it down. And we're good. So I'm going to get my color paint, throw it in here, hide it, go to my particles. First, I'm going to turn off that glow. And under the particle, I'm going to change the blend type to composite because I don't want a light effect. Let's do texture faded disk. Our texture will be the color paint, effects and mask. And I'm going to make it white on both ends so that I get the color of the paint. Now, since this is paint, I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Let's try 0.7 and 0.7. Is that too large? And I'll get rid of the gravity this time around. You notice it's much slower to render when you're using a custom particle. Where'd my gravity go? That'd be under physics, sorry. Now, if I spread this out a little bit, you'll see it's changing the motion path. Let's get rid of that resistance. And see what we've got. Also, let's go to our particle. See, now that's having some rotation added to it because it's a custom particle. I'm just going to let this render this one frame real quick. Let's do 100. Let's see what that looks like now. So we're starting to get a paint splotch happening with that. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to turn off the background color and swap in the black paint. And I'm just going to hide the original one. Scale this down so it fits. Like such. And it'll update in here. Like such. So I could use this to get a custom ink reveal effect using those ink particles very tight together like that. Let me drop down my particle count. Now I've got something more manageable. Like such. Any questions on that? All right. Last two things I'm going to show. Let me turn this back on. I'm going to reset my particles. All right. So, let me hit U. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got the null. I'm getting rid of the null. There we go. Let's try... Let's stick with explosive. But this time, under effects, I'm going to go to effect camera. Because I kind of like what this particle system, the physics engine is doing. It's just going in the wrong direction. So this is where the floor helps. I can see rotating X minus 90 degrees. Now they're coming towards the camera. Okay? And this is sort of like a hyperspeed type of effect. So if you just wanted to go for something like that, just set your particles to whatever color you want. Now you got that happening. But I'm going to do a faded sphere. And I'm going to do a quick star system. The opacity map, good. All right, so let's get that working. So that's going to be under physics. I'm going to crank up the resistance. Get rid of the velocity, because I don't want to move in really. Get rid of the gravity. Let's get rid of the extra angle. And now let's spread this out very far in each axis. I'm going to get rid of this expression just by holding down Alt and Option. We're going to have these live a very long time. And let me slide this down so they're already born. I'm just sliding that layer down in my timeline. Let's have them live even longer. Let's try 2. So now if I add a camera to the scene, let's do an orbit camera. There's my 3D star system. And to kick it up a notch from there, we'll go to our particle. And under birth to death, let's do custom. Here's our custom color map. And now I can change this to the colors of stars. Let's say when they die, they're closer to blue. And you could just look up scientific colors for them. I'm just grabbing whatever I can. Let's just say this. You can find your own palette, but... So now we've got a multicolored star system because they're all different colors based upon their life. If I shorten the life, I'll get more color to it. So that's pretty good. And I can just duplicate this particle system. Command D. I'll call this stars. And I can throw a glow on there, actually. I'll turn it on. There we go. And I could bring in that smoke that we had back in week 9. Because remember, each particle system can have one particle in it. That's why you have multiple particle systems. So if I grab that cloud, I can use it to make space gas. There's the cloud. Download. I'm not going to animate this because there's no atmosphere in space. So it's not going to be moving. I want that still, eerie type of look. So, you know, when possible, do research so that your motion is correct. You know, because it would look pretty silly if my fog was scientifically incorrect. So that's why I was saying you can find reference colors to use. Or you just do whatever you think looks good stylistically. So I'm going to bring this in here. Hide it. This is my fog. I'm going to use the same colors as the stars, but not the glow. Turn that off. Let's go to my particle. Texture faded disk. Texture. We'll use the fog pre-comp. Effects and mask. And here we're going to crank up the size a lot. And we're going to drop down the opacity to give it more of a fog gas look. Let's see what that custom color map looks like. Let's get rid of some of this yellow, though. Go for more of like space gas colors. And there you have it. You got some fog, some gas, some stars, and now you could just animate your camera into it. If your particles are still being born, like I said, you could just drag the layers down to where they're fully on the screen already, so you don't have that problem happening. And you could animate a camera. See, I like this because we got some nice color difference to the fog. Let that render. And see, you can fly through it with the zoom. It starts working. Let's try this one. Do I actually have to have the camera selected? That's weird. Let's try classic. Well, my computer must be overwhelmed at the second, so we'll get out of there. Any questions on some of the more complex particle settings, like down in the extras? Okay. And remember, you can only have one particle per layer. That's why I've got one layer for the fog, one layer for the stars. And here's the last thing. You made it through the long, boring lecture. And for Ellen, this one's going to apply to you. So I'm going to use that cat head I had earlier. And let's get rid of these. Don't need them. Duplicate this. I'll throw particle world on it. All right, so I'm going to do particle, custom faded disk, choose my cat head. Make it white for the birth and the death to keep the color of the artwork. Let's make this larger. Okay, good. I don't want this opacity. I want full size variation, and I do not want it fading off and on. I'm going to make these live longer and have less born. Try texture square. There we go. Now I don't have that soft edge. Okay, so there's my particles. Now, with the grid, I can use that as a floor to interact with the particles. And that will be under physics, I believe. Yep, floor. So first, let me move these. Let me lower that. I'm going to move my producer up higher. Oh, wait, that's the radius. Sorry. Here we go. So now they're falling. Here's my floor. Floor position is how you raise it or lower it. And I'm going to, under floor action, set it to ice. Let me raise this up a little bit. So now, when the particles hit the floor, they're going to slide across it like it's ice. That's what ice does. I'm going to change that to glue. And what's going to happen is they're going to pile up like if you spilled flour or snowflakes coming down on the ground. That's what glue does. They get stuck and they stay there. And lastly, there is bounce. And you could choose how bouncy you want it to be to get the look you want. So if you're animating raindrops, you'd have the raindrops come down and then they'd bounce off the ground like such. So this is where if you made a custom particle that looked like snow or something like that, it would be popping out of your igloo as it pops up. And you can get that little bit of scatter or bounce as it hits the hard ground. I think bounce would probably look better. That's just my 2 cents. And just remember the floor position under physics. That's where you can raise or lower it. So when that igloo pops up, you could use a little bit of smoke coming out to look like, you know, little wisps of snow because it looks like smoke. And then, you know, a couple little rocks of ice bouncing about. Any questions on the floor and how it reacts to the floor? Okay. Well, there's only one more thing to go over. I lied. And this one, I want everyone's undivided attention. So, one second, let me purge this. And I'm going to do a very simple animation so that it doesn't take long. Oh, wait, let me change this. Always check your sequence settings before you render. There we go, we got that. And here's my square. Oops. Here's my square. P for position. Go here. Go forward. Move it over there. Here's my finished animation. Okay? Boom. So now it's render time. All right, I want everyone to say yes, so I know you're here and you're listening.
Yes. Yes.
All right, great. You're all there. All right. As I've said, I'm recording this, so you'll have access to it. Here is how you render in After Effects, because there were some issues with the new update. So first, let me check my preferences by going to General. So I think it's in General. I'll find out. Okay. Yeah, so I went Edit, Preferences, and then on this side, Memory and Performance. Make sure Enable Multi-Frame Rendering is turned off, okay? Edit, Preferences, Memory and Performance, click off Enable Multi-Frame Rendering, okay? That's the first step. And I'm going to hit OK. Step 2, I'm going to open up Media Encoder so that it's running in the background because it takes a while to open up, and I don't feel like waiting for it. So that's going to start opening in the background. Here's the next step. Make sure you have the composition selected that you want to render, like your main animation with all the nested sequences in it. So once you have the right composition selected, and you've checked your settings and you know they're right, you'll go Composition, Add to Render Queue. So make sure you're in the right comp, it's set up right, Composition, Add to Render Queue. Then you click on it. The render queue will pop up in your timeline, but if you're in a different workspace, it'll pop up in a different area. I did not want that to happen, but what can you do? Okay. So the first thing you do, click on the blue word lossless. Go to Format and choose QuickTime. Everything else is fine. Then you click OK. So I just changed my format from AVI to QuickTime. Then I click OK. The next step, the blue word over here, is what you're going to name it and where you're going to save it to. So I'll just choose my desktop, but you'll pick somewhere that means something to you. Name it. Hit save, and then the last step is to hit this render button over here. Now, Media Encoder has a lot of issues with Adobe After Effects, not just in the lab, but in other places. That chime lets me know I'm done because I did a very fast, simple animation. So I just selected it, hit backspace, close my render queue. Now, Media Encoder is open because I let it run in the background. Here's what you do inside Media Encoder. There's a plus under the word queue. Click it once. Choose where your render went to. I did mine to the desktop. There it is right there. And I hit open. Based upon how big your file is and how long your animation was, will be how long it takes to come in. These are the settings you will use in Media Encoder. H264. You can get to it through this drop down. The little arrow. H264. Match source, high bit rate. Match source means whatever size your composition was that you rendered, it will match it. 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second. That's what I had set up. So it's matching that, and the high bit rate means it will not be very compressed and it will look good. So that was the drop downs here to get there. Lastly, click here once on the blue text to say where it's going and what you're going to call it. I'll put underscore. I'm just going to put compressed so that you see that this is the compressed file. You got to rename it because you cannot overwrite the file that you're rendering. Do you understand that? Like if this was called maple syrup, I can't re-render it as maple syrup unless it's a different file format, which this happens to be. But as a general rule of thumb, I'll give it something so I know that it's low res or high res or compressed. The last step is this green arrow up here. Once I've got the right format, H264, match source, high bitrate, I've named it and said where it's going to go. Make sure you know where it's going to go because it's a pain if you send it to some place that you didn't know where it went. You click the green play button. And then down here, it'll start to render your animation. And based upon how complex it is and how long your file was, it's already done. So I click here, hit backspace to get rid of it, hit yes. And if I'm doing more rendering, I just leave Media Encoder running in the background. Okay, so you see I've got two files. How to render compressed. Why did I go through all that? The first file is .mov. It's uncompressed. It's TV or movie quality, very large file. Let's take a look at these file size differences. It's 11 times the size of the compressed one, okay? Your animations, I've had students give me files that were like 4 to 10 gigs big. And if you have a slow Wi-Fi connection, it's going to take a very long time to copy that up to Google Drive, okay? So that's where compression comes in. This is 1/3 of a meg. It took it down immeasurably. H264 files can play on both Mac and PC. .movs, you may have to download QuickTime Player on a PC to be able to preview it. That's why it's a good habit when it doesn't have to be full quality to do an H264 high bit compressed render like that. Smaller file, and anyone can open it and play it on a computer. So once you've rendered out your homework, which is due Tuesday of next week, you're going to put it in your Google Drive folder and just email me it's there. That way, I can take a look at it and Professor Jones can also see it because I share all those folders with him. Okay. All right. See how that quickly just fixed everything? I grabbed the old artwork and brought it in. Nice. All right, let's preview that in all its glory. And again, sound effects, stuff like that are really going to push this. Music. You want to add some atmosphere. Careful of those buttons. They're a little bit off there. That's an easy fix.
But that, I don't know why that's happening. But like, that's not, like, everything, like on your screen, everything's like off. But like on mine, it's not.
Okay, as long as it's fine on yours. Because, like I said, I relinked your artwork with the old file because it wasn't reading it. So if it's working for you, that's all that matters, you know. Now, watch the final resting place of your logo at the end here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, it's just like, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is, but it's like everything on your screen is
Oh,
changing.
okay. Hey, no problem. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Cause okay, as long as it lines up. But yeah, this is looking pretty good. Um,
I just don't wanna submit it and I feel and it kind of looks like
oh
that.
no. Here, okay, this is a great question a great concern that was brought up. Here's the beauty of knowing how to render and doing it yourself. If it looks good on your computer and it's playing properly and you render it, it will render properly. You always check your render when you're done. If I were to render this, it'd come out wrong because this artwork's not working right on my machine. Everybody got that? That's why you should render yourself and not rely on me to do it for you.
Should I share my screen so you can see it, but not like?
No, I trust you. You know, like I said, your artwork link broke, and so you know, what might be nice as a final touch is if this star animates in on a path like that afterward, like once the logo's resolved itself. But, you know, like I said, some sound effects. I'm not sure if the legs are moving.
Very slightly, but they have a.
Okay, make it a little less subtle because when your character is moving this much, the subtle motion gets lost.
Okay.
Pardon me? What about the import? Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, the star. I was actually going to bring up that point. You should put some stars and some space gas in the background.
Okay.
Now, here's another important thing. That would look pretty, but also you could do a stylized look to it. You don't want to do photorealistic space with a computer graphic looking spaceman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if this was photoreal, I'd say photoreal background. Do something more customized, like those particles. You could do your own custom particle, like that looks hand drawn like this, for the star and for the cloud, and then it won't look photorealistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all the same steps. It's just when you go to that texture faded disk, just pick your own artwork that you put in. That's like fits in the 200 by 200 pixel pre-comp. Yeah, so some stars, some gas, sound effects, a little bit of music. This will look really nice.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh-huh. What might also help is when you do have the stars and the gas, if some of that's lightly reflected in the mask as it comes up and then goes away, the closer it gets. You know what I mean? Because yeah, so since this is a reflective surface, we should see a little bit of the environment around it as it's getting a little closer. And then it could like start fading out here as the logo becomes more prominent. So, all right. Yeah, just those few little things to push it. And like I said, if it's working on your end, great. Because, like I said, the art broke when I re-imported it. So, Google Drive does that a lot from time to time. All right, excellent. Any questions or concerns?
No, I don't think so. No, thank you.
Okay, and for everybody out there within the sound of my voice, does everybody have their own YouTube channel yet?
Yes.
Okay. How about you, Ellen? Okay. If you've got your own YouTube channel, come on. Over here, go to YouTube Studio from your little profile. Then down here is Audio Library. If you use copyright, royalty-free music from YouTube, most other social media platforms will not ban your video. Don't use copyrighted music, okay? That's the first step. Secondly, what I do is I click on this filter right here, and I choose attribution not required. If it says attribution required, you have to put in the description of your video the name of the song and where you got it from. It's just I don't want to run the risk of, taking a song and not giving it credit. So let's just pretend I want to do this song right here. All right, spectacular. I love it. Just click download. So I'll download it, or you could click right here. Wait for it to download. All right, there we go. I bring it in. Save it with your work. I just put in the downloads folder because I'm lazy. All right, let's see, a lot of layers here. So I'm just going to put it at the top because it doesn't matter because it's audio only. And I can hit the spacebar to preview it. Okay, so let's pretend that's perfect and the song's great. Obviously, you'll pick something more appropriate. Remember, if you twirl down, waveform is where you can see your audio if you need to line up sound effects. That's under waveform. But if I want to fade this out, you usually want about 3 seconds for a fade out. So I click the audio stopwatch, go there, and I'll bring it down about minus 30 decibels. Now let's preview that. And here comes the fade out. Much more soothing than a hard, jarring audio cut. So, you can bring in your sound effects. And again, like I said, use the waveform to line them up, like any beeps or pings to line them up where you want them. And, you're good. Any questions on that?
Yeah, are sound effects required for this design?
For you, yes. Not for anyone else, though.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. No, you don't need to have sound effects. But when you see something like this, you'd expect to hear some pings and, some sci-fi noises, and it will really push it. When you add music and you add sound effects, you're showing future jobs, the people who are hiring, the hiring bosses, look, I know how to do all these things, and I took not only consideration of the motion, but I incorporated sound effects and music to make a completed concept. It makes you a more desirable candidate. Oh, you got the floor working. Very good. That is the floor, right? Yeah. There you go. That's a quick application. Okay, now, for this text here, you could, one, use Saber, or if you're using the advanced Lightning, it'll really kick it up a notch.
Yeah, I did that before I figured before I downloaded it.
Okay, all right, yeah. So if you're doing Saber, awesome, but this is just for anyone else out there. When you're doing lightning effects, lightning should only be seen, or electrical arcs, should only be seen for a couple frames. So, like, I would cut this a couple times, like Command-Shift-D to duplicate it. Oop, let me... That. Then, maybe here. So it's like there for a little bit. And that. And also if there was like some life to it. Like, let's try the direction. That might have been a few frames too short. That's what that's doing. Okay. All right, so I know what I'm going to do then. I'm going to let's try that. Yeah, the saber will be the way to go. But yeah, the little arcs, you'd probably need multiple ones, like 9 layers of it to have it look, half as convincing. But I love the particles that you were messing around with. Those look great.
I think I'm still I'm still going with the other version that I showed you.
Oh yeah, you could do both. You could maybe try the one with the shatter plus these particles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm working on the proper noise.
okay.
I'm trying to use the proper noise to have the word like faded in and out, and then the short context. So that's what I'm working on now.
Okay, yeah. I'm really psyched at how quickly you absorbed what I showed you tonight. I mean that's a very professional application of the bounce effect and the motion blur on these. This looks great. You did a really good job with those particles. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Anything else you want me to go over with that?
No, I'm working on the proper noise.
Okay. And also what I like here, I like how they slowly fade out over time, which they would do since it's a heat element. It would dissipate. So nice. That's really slick. Very happy to see that. Hopefully everybody's learning new stuff from this, and you're all pushing yourselves very nicely. So anyone else have anything they want to show me? Okay. So I'll think of something fun I can do, and then hey Owen, which lab time do you want tonight? So I'll stay here as long as you stay. Like I said, it's up to you. You want to stay late? Fine with me. You want to go early? Fine with me. Because your work's looking good. This is important. Everybody's got their work backed up on Google Drive. That's awesome. That's what I want to see, because I don't want people losing their work. Also, if you've got an external drive or an SD card, please save it there as you're working too, because I don't want to see anyone lose their work. That's just a little aside.
Could you show me? It's going to be in the purpose, right? I just wanted you to show me when you go to your YouTube channel how to search for the audio.
Oh, yeah. How to find audio again? Yeah, sure. No problem at all. So up here at the top, where you click on YouTube Studio, and then you go all the way down to the bottom of your little channel thing on the left and click audio. And there's also a sound effects tab. But just remember, I usually do attribution not required. Let's look at sound effects.
Yeah, that's where did you find?
Okay, so for me, I have free music, and then the next tab was sound effects.
No, when you click attribution.
Oh, yeah. No problem. Sorry. Okay, so you're seeing this tab. This upside down triangle, you click there, and that's where you can get to duration, genre. That's where attribution not required is. So
I don't. All I have when I click on that, all I have is search, track title, category, duration. That's it.
there's not a lot of them. So, don't get your hopes up. But you can always try and look for free ones online.
Okay.
For the sound effects says. But the music, there's tons of free music, let's say I wanted genre. Let's try cinematic. Hit apply. And I could say, you know what? I don't even need it to be that long. So let's go duration. Let's say longer than 1 minute. Sure. Oh, wait. That was the wrong time. You got to have the semicolon or the colon, whatever, in YouTube. They don't do the periods like Premiere and After Effects. Like such. I played this one at my wedding. And everybody was like, that was lit. And I was like, you know it. Yeah, so like I said, you just click here to download, or downloads over there.
Okay, got it.
No problem. All right, let's try. Bringing this video clip. And remember, if you're dealing with video clips in After Effects, you drag it to the new composition button and it will make your video clip match the settings. Wonder what this one does. Let me hide that. Let's try it on a shape layer. Oh, okay. I see what it's going to do now. The bump map was a giveaway. So it's going to be used as a map on another layer. There's a weird effect. Okay, so that's how that works. Like I said, sometimes you just got to play around. There's a lot of useless ones in here, but every now and again you find a good one. You could animate those as well. And remember, whenever you're messing around with effects, just remember, go big and then dial it down. You'll be able to see what the effect does. Like I said, very few people know all the effects in After Effects do, but the crosshairs, you'd always click once and then say where you want the effect to start. Velocity, a low number will keep the elements closer together. Bigger number will spread them apart. Gravity, you'll either pull it downwards or upwards, as in lighter than air. Resistance will tighten things up within the particle simulation, as well as make it a little bit weaker. And sometimes with effects, going in a positive direction will take you one way, and going in a negative direction will take you the opposite direction. And again, with this, there weren't a lot of options that I could animate. So I adjusted the noise for this effect as well as the lighting just to give it a little bit of life. You know, sometimes you just gotta experiment and see what works and what doesn't work. I'm going to keep this gradient just to give me something to mess around with. I'm going to pre-compose this. Let's try and desaturate it. Get a little bit more tone in there. Let's try a new layer. Let's see if I put on here what happens. Okay, now it's starting to work because I pre-composed the layer. Let's see if I turn off this fiddle. Yeah, okay. All I had to do was pre-compose it to get to work. Now it's starting to look like a candy commercial. The 4-color gradient I put on this is what's helping with that. All right, I'm happy with this. Now let's push it because that's what LabTime's all about. I'm going to open up my comp. This is nice and thin before the effect took place on it. So nothing's selected. I'm going to do a trim path over it. Try and stay in the middle. I don't want this to be thicker than it needs to be because I don't want to draw on parts that I don't want drawn on before I get to them. Since there's so many thick and thins, I should probably have multiple strokes come in. That's probably what's going to need to happen. You never know, you might get lucky. There we go. Happy with that. So with that selected, I'm going to add my trim paths. And animate the end, because the first point is the start, the last point is the end. And I want to draw on in that direction. Let's slow that down a little bit, because since we're making it look liquidy, I'm going to want to have a little bit of slowness to it. We're going to want to slow out and slow in a bit more. So that's set up. All I got to do is go to the layer below, go to my modes, and use it as a track mat. I've got my letter draw on. There's a little bit more we're seeing, and I would fix that up if I was doing this professionally, but I'm just showing you some ideas. Gradients can be used to push your effects. Because some things work off of light values. And that'll help drive the effect and influence the animation. And this was the same font and the same gradient I had with the last effect, the hair effect. But I put a different, I pre-composed it first. Then I put glass on it, which used the gradient tones of the pre-comp below it to get this effect that is completely different from what we had before. But still the same font, still the same gradient. So like I said, I mean, if you've got one thing and you got time, experiment, play around, be creative, and have fun, and you can get wildly different results with the same set of artwork that you've got. That borderline almost looks like it was drawn in a 3D program. There's so much tone to it and depth from the light and the shading. I will end Thursday's lecture a little early so you have some extra lab time. And homework number 1 is due by 5:30 p.m. Tuesday of next week. So I have time to download everything, get my thoughts prepared. So everyone be prepared to present as well as offer constructive criticism to your classmates. And based upon how long the crit goes, we'll continue on with the lecture if there's time. We're going to start on 3D next. And 3D is going to take some time because I'm going to show you the easy, less professional 3D and the more modern, complex 3D. It's not going to be Pixar level 3D, but it is modern motion design used in commercial 3D. So there is a point and a method behind my madness now that we're done with particles. No problem at all. I hope you have a great night and hope everyone continues having fun learning, and reach out to me if you have any questions. I'll have the lecture edited down.
Okay, thank you.
No problem at all.
Have a good night.
You got it. Have a great evening, everybody.